Morning folks, and welcome back. As we're still in lockdown, I thought I'd set up the old baker tent out here in the garden, just so I've got somewhere dry and comfortable to film for the next few weeks. If you saw my recent Canvas Swag overnight camp, you'll know that this little corner of my garden is a horrible muddy quagmire. So I've spread a load of bark chippings all over this area to try and kind of keep that mud at bay, and it seems to be working okay. So hopefully that will keep this area reasonably clean, or clean enough for cooking, because that's what I'm planning on doing today. I've grabbed a load of logs from my log store. You know, obviously I'm not able to get out into the woods and collect firewood like I would normally, but that'll still need processing down, splitting down into smaller pieces to get my fire going. Right, I've got the makings of my fire. For tinder, I'm just going to use wood shavings. You know, I'm a carpenter. I've got no shortage of shavings, and I'm going to use good old flint and steel to get that lit. I've made a couple of feather sticks, and then I've got some smaller pieces, sort of pencil-sized pieces that I've split down to get things going, and then onto bigger stuff. So this is what I'm having for my breakfast this morning. This is a Chilita Porterhouse steak from the steak shop. It's about 2¼ inches thick, and well, let's take a look. That is a serious bit of meat. We've got sirloin on one side and fillet on the other, and it's going to take a bit of careful cooking just because it's so thick. Those of you who've seen my videos before will know I like my steaks really rare, blue, but I don't want my steak to be cold, you know? in the middle. So I'm going to carefully bring this up to temperature, heat it up carefully, high up over the fire, where it's not going to actually cook, it's just going to warm through. Well, that steak is warming through slowly. I keep turning it over just to make sure that heat is even, but it's quite chilly this morning, so I don't want the top of the steak to get cold again while the bottom is warming up, if you see what I mean, so I'm just keeping turning it over. The steak company who sent this steak to me, firstly, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this. It's not often I have a steak like this, so I'm really looking forward to it. But they are primarily a restaurant. And you know, obviously they were a thriving business before this pandemic and before lockdown, and like a lot of businesses, they've had to find other ways of making ends meet. So they've decided to start a kind of mail order steak business. So they're still selling the same steaks that they would serve in their restaurant, and they are amazing quality steaks, you know, really sort of unusual steaks that are quite hard to come by normally. And instead of selling them through the restaurant, they're selling them direct to you, obviously at a discounted rate. You know, they're special steaks. They're not your run-of-the-mill supermarket steak, that's for sure. And obviously, you're going to pay more for it. But you know, in my mind, we're all stuck here in lockdown. Restaurants and pubs and things are closed. We can't go out for a treat and enjoy a meal out. So I think it's probably quite a nice thing to be able to treat yourself to a nice big fat steak instead. You know, you can cook it at home, you can cook it exactly how you want it, and it's delivered to your door. All good. They've given me a 15% discount code to pass on to you guys, so if you just type in Simon in block capitals at checkout, you'll get 15% off your order. While I wait for that steak to do its thing, I thought I'd take a minute and just answer a couple of questions which have popped up in the comments lately. The first one is concerning knives that I use. I have three kind of bushcraft knives, if you like, that I use regularly, and I'm planning on putting a video together showing them in a bit more detail. But one question I get in particular is about the newest knife I've been using, which is this one here. This was made by a friend of mine, a guy called Rob Taylor, who I was on the hunter-gatherer challenge with Joe O'Leary a year or so ago. He was one of the other participants, and he makes knives. He's a Brit, but he lives in Austria, and he's kind of wanting to start up a bit of a knife-making business, a small business, and he made this for me. I'll put a link to his Instagram page. He's Old Ways Bushcraft, and any knives that he makes that are up for sale, he puts on there. Another question I get asked a lot is about this pan here with the handles on that I use as a kind of fire pit. I have this sunk into the ground, and this is an old tar pan. I guess it was used by road workers or roofers maybe for melting tar in as a waterproofing. And this originally sat on a stand which had wheels on it and a handle, and you could wheel it around and you could wheel it over a fire and, you know, heat that tar, melt that tar for use, and then pour it out. I was lucky to find this when I moved into this house I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. This thing was sitting at the end of the garden in the undergrowth and I dragged it out, and yeah, it's perfect for this. It's thick cast iron and it's ideal as a fire pit. It protects the ground, it stops the fire from spreading, keeps everything all neat and contained and nice and tidy. I originally had this thing above ground, resting on bricks, and I drilled a load of holes around the inside here to encourage a bit of airflow. They're kind of redundant now that I've sunk it into the ground, but they are creating a bit of a problem in that the ground water level is really high at the moment. It's not so bad today, but over the past few days, this thing just fills up with water. Water comes in through those holes, and it's really hard to get a fire going when it's sort of in a pond, you know. So I've lifted it up out of the ground a bit and put some rocks underneath it just to help a bit, and it's okay. Like I say, today the water level has gone down a little bit, so it isn't so bad today. But yeah, but that's what it is anyway. A tar pan. Right, I think that steak has had long enough warming. You can see it's taken on a bit of colour, but it hasn't actually cooked. It's just allowed that fat to render down a bit, and that should all be warmed through and nice. I'm going to season the steak with some cracked black pepper steak seasoning. And on it goes. Now I'd normally only cook my steaks for 30 seconds or so on each side, you know, over a really hot heat, just enough to sear it. But this is such a big steak, I'm gonna need to give it longer. Even though it's had that time to warm through, it needs to cook a bit more than 30 seconds on each side, I think. So I'm gonna give it a minute or two, I think. Oh yeah. Whew. And let it rest. Right, let's take a look. Oh. Yeah, that's the way. It's probably a little bit more done than I would normally have it, but I reckon this is going to be a delight. Wow. That is amazing. I've cut a few bits of the sirloin up for Maggie, and I've saved a little bit on here for Tom. He's he's still in bed. I'm going to go wake him up with some steak in a minute. Let's have a look at the fillet side. I don't normally choose fillet purely because it tends to be less fatty, and I like the fat in a steak. But I have a feeling this is going to be as special as the sirloin side. Yeah, melt in your mouth.
Come on in.
There you go. There you go. That was amazing. Thank you, The Steak Shop, and thank you for watching. See you soon.